So what is economic development? It is not overall development, which includes social, legal, and political. It is not economic independence, because trade can be an important engine of growth, and therefore the idea of separating yourself from other countries does not mean that your country will develop. It is not industrialization. Industrialization, meaning the focus on manufacturing rather than agriculture, does not necessarily use your resources in the best possible way. If the rural sector can prosper, it will thereafter afford what the urban sector is producing. This is a consequence of the ordering of needs. The rural sector pretty much takes care of basic needs, and additional income is then allocated to improving the quality of life beyond basic needs. So what is economic development? It is growth plus change in the structure of the economy. Economic development is primarily concerned with producing more of what the society considers important as policy goals. So economic development is a long-run phenomenon. It is about sustained growth with structural change, changing the structure of the economy. There is therefore a vital distinction between initiating development and sustaining development over time. One definition of economic development: the process of improving the quality of life for all. This includes raising the living standards, creating conditions conducive to growth of individuals' esteem, and increasing individuals' freedom of choice. Development is manifest via increasing per capita income, subject to a decline in the numbers below the absolute poverty line and a reduction in income inequality. The main goal of development can be said then to be an increase in per capita income, with sub-goals relating to what we call distributive justice: reduction in income inequality, reduction in absolute poverty, offering a minimum level of health, education, and nutrition standards to the population, diversifying the economics of the country so that there is more than one traditional economic structure, but having enough diversification so that if bad times hit one industry, the entire economy is not affected, and fair valuation of economic output of various groups, as opposed to exploitative valuation. Most of what we consider to be economic development is post-World War II. And I've mentioned that 1947 is when India was split into India and Pakistan. Pakistan was later split into Pakistan and Bangladesh. And many other countries were watching India and the Indian model to figure out what they wanted to do as they decolonize and set their own course, so to speak. What needed to happen was, once the countries separated themselves from their colonial powers, they had to set their own course for themselves. It's sort of like becoming 18 and deciding that you're going to be an adult and you will live your life, make your own decisions, make your own mistakes, etc. It's often the case that governments promote economic development for the benefit of a particular class. Prior to World War II, most developing countries, as colonies of the industrialized nations, saw the objectives of the ruling classes in their countries, or the colonizers, being met at the expense of the masses. In the first generation of development, post-World War II to the 1970s, most development programs were evaluated by the amount of attention they gave to economic growth, increase in GDP. However, dissatisfaction with this led to a refocusing of strategy to meet the second generation. Growth was no longer the main objective in the index of development. Most colonial powers were required by the United Nations after World War II to give up their colonies. Thus, governments have had a lot to do to help the economic conditions of their peoples. Governments in many third world countries still have not done much to help the poor. Most have, however, instituted some form of social security, unemployment insurance, progressive taxation, and, to a lesser extent, antitrust legislation. Some have used land reform as the main pillar of social and economic reform. Others have concentrated on freely available education, and still others have focused on political reform. In general, however, development planning came into vogue after World War II, and data collection became important to determine the answers to the questions of poverty and income inequality. The data to date have shown that income inequality has actually increased in some developing countries since they have become independent. Economic growth is predicated on the increase or improvement of capital, labor, and technology. Capital accumulation occurs when resources are saved and invested to obtain greater quantities of goods in the future. This investment may be in physical capital and intermediate infrastructural goods and services. Beyond this, there is also an investment in human capital, education, and training, involving improvements in the quality and quantity of skilled workers. Capital investments of the various kinds we've talked about enhance labor productivity and lead to improved quality of living. Increases in the labor force, independent of any capital improvements, can also lead to economic growth. Note that this does not generally lead to increase in per capita output, and given the law of diminishing returns, generally results in declining average output. Economic growth via labor force growth can thus be detrimental in the long run. Technological progress. Economic growth via technological progress implies using a given quantity of resources to yield increasing outputs. Technological progress can be labor-saving, capital-saving, or neutral. Labor-saving technological progress releases labor from a production process. Neutral technological process releases both the resources, labor and capital, in similar proportions. Since most of the technological improvements are made by research and development conducted in developed countries, most technological progress is of the labor-saving variety. Technological progress is shown by shifting the production possibility frontier outward to yield more output.